Our first talk is a keynote speaker. It's Professor James Hetherington. He's the professor of computational science and the director of advanced research of the Advanced Research Computing Center. He works with researchers from a variety of fields to understand the ways in which data, software, and compute-intensive methodologies are transforming research and innovation. He is particularly interested in questions of trustworthiness and validity in digital research. He directs the UCL Advanced Research Computing Center, a pioneering hybrid academic professional center, home for the new professionals who are bringing data and compute-intensive research and innovation to life. And in this talk, he'll be looking at the opportunities and dangers present in this transition and considering the responsibilities that we all have as university data scientists and AI engineers in this work. So with that, let's give a round of applause to Professor Hetherington. Would you like this?
This is best, I think, if it's on. Is this?
This is for recording, and this is for the speaker, for the microphones. And let me pull up your slides. Okay, it needs to be unmuted.
Sorry.
So at the top, there's that slider.
Testing.
Excellent.
Testing. No. Yes. 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 Cool. Hello, everyone. I'm James. I'm going to go over here and walk about a bit. That's what I usually do when I'm talking. Hope this is going to work. Yes.
We're recording. The video is recording this part. Just so.
Oh, okay. I can't walk around too much.
Sorry.
Okay. Can't my style a bit. All right. I'll manage. This model comes from Jim Gray at Microsoft Research, but I quite like it. The story of the methods of science and scholarship, we've been doing experiments for a few thousand years. We've been doing maths for a few hundred years. You know, this is very approximate, right? And I started my career during the period of what we can call third paradigm science. Simulations, models, we understand the laws of physics or chemistry or sociology. We stick them in a computer and we make it work out the implications of those for us, right? And we build some big computers to do that. And then more recently, we've been doing a different thing where we just put the evidence in and let the computer work out the laws of physics for us as well, right? And that's pretty cool. And it's all been very, very exciting working through the transformation of research through the third and fourth paradigms of science. Right? Lots of us who are interested in this, we used to call it e-science or digital science or computational science, yeah? The problem is it produces a lot of posters at computer science conferences in e-science without actually changing the way in which people do their research, right? A lot of us work on the method. Oh, I'll make some tools, I'll make some middleware that makes it easier to use these methods in research, but it's not actually penetrating the labs. It's not making a difference to the way those things are done. I always like to use Turing's example in this, in thinking about being both interested in really getting to grips with understanding these things and making things that are genuinely useful for people doing it, right? So this is the universal Turing machine, fundamental computer model of computing and computer science, right? This is the Bombi machine that helped to win the war, yeah. That example, right, of being both a craftsperson, really committed to building things that are well-designed tools, as well as a scholar, is going to be a theme for what I'm talking about. What I'm worried about in this context is the transition from making it up as we go along, kind of hoping that we stick some things, some numbers in a bucket and stir it a bit and it produces some useful results, to actual science. This is phrenology, it's not true, right? This is the door of the British Medical Association, just near our lab in London. That was quite a journey, right? I think we're on some kind of journey like that in these spaces. And it's important because the things we're making make a difference. So I use the analogy of when you are a doctor, when you are a civil engineer, and you build buildings, you know, in an earthquake, some of the buildings stay up and some of the buildings fall down, right? That's not just coincidence, right? It's because some of them have been built to code and some of them haven't, right? There are standards, there are practices, there are processes, right? We are entering that. We are now in a phase where what we're doing with data and computers and software is of that level of importance, right? The IT industry has just gone through, you know, the Grenfell of IT, as I sometimes call it, right? Where lives were destroyed, you know, people going to jail, committing suicide as a result of bad programming, right? We are not yet, as a community, the people who are transforming society, transforming the world through the use of data and computers and software anywhere near ready enough to take on these responsibilities, right? There is no such thing as someone being struck off from being a data scientist, right? And yet we are this level of powerful. And this matters, particularly for those of us who are doing things in data science for science, AI for science. I'm getting some feedback. Because we're using these methods to make important decisions for society, right? It's not just, science has never just been for fun, but science is a political football. This is me asking a generative model to draw a picture of science as a political football. So, you know, it's the thing now is to get generative models to do your illustrations for pictures. Anyway, but you know, when I was working, I used to work for a startup company doing climate simulation stuff, and during that time, there was a model published from UEA that had some wrong code in, right? The scientific conclusions were absolutely sound. Just had some bits of wrong code in, okay? And that was the model that was used for part of the modeling in the then Conference of Parties, you know, COP conferences that look at global climate policy. And it was called ClimateGate, right? And all these bad people seized upon the fact that there was a few bad lines of code in that model that came out of the university, and used it to undermine the conclusions of the research, because science is political football. Right? During COVID, I was pulled in from the Turing to be Chief Data Science Advisor to the Joint Biosecurity Centre, so we made the R number, and I got some, this is being recorded, so I'll be careful. I got some people from this lovely university to do a nice review of the code of a certain lovely epidemiologist from Imperial, and some of the flaws that were discovered in that science was sound, right? But again, some of the flaws that were discovered in that code leaked in the register. If you don't know the register, it's a scurrilous tech industry website, and again, that was used to attack the science, right? But it is important, right, that the code that we use in research, that the models that we use in research are well engineered, right? And we've got into the habit in a university context of not understanding that treating the reliability requirements around the realization of our models in code as critical to the trustworthiness of that research, right? So much research code is some entertaining thousands of lines of Fortran, right? Those subroutines, we've all seen it. A bit worried about the feedback. So those are the kind of questions that I'm worrying about. So just a little bit on kind of things that I'm interested in, and then just so you know who I am and why I'm talking about these things, and then go on, computer, do scroll.
Sorry.
Thanks. Yeah,
Sorry.
good. So long time ago, theoretical physicist. Then at the end of PhDing, got into systems biology using third paradigm science, computational modeling, to look at questions of physiology. Wrote too much code and not enough papers during that postdoc. Just people know who I am. Went to the MathWorks for a bit. Some of MATLAB is my fault, sorry. Went to a startup company doing climate modeling, came back to university, did some more comp bio, and then founded the UCL Research Software Group. Did that for a bit, and then I was the founding director of research engineering at the Alan Turing Institute, which is the UK's National Institute for Data Science and AI, and this centre is obviously closely associated with that. Had a bit of an unfortunate, entertaining period during COVID, working on that stuff, and then founded the centre, which we'll talk about more in the second half of this talk. Some things I'm interested in, trusted research environments. So how do we build and maintain a space for using the methods of modern data science and machine learning at scale in a secure environment where we can work with things like patient data, other personal identifiable data, local government data, crime information, etc. If you've ever worked with sensitive data, you've probably found yourself in an environment where you need to fill in a 10-page Word form to install one more Python package. I'm being sarcastic, but not very. How do we enable the flourishing of curiosity-driven research in environments with enough GPU capability in it to do the things we're interested in a way that's not a pain in the neck? It's a really interesting engineering problem. Uncertainty quantification is absolutely essential for the use of these kind of models, right? But what people often do, and I think we can do better, is treat these things just as maths, but they're maths made of code, right? Everything we do in this space is maths made of code, right? And that gives us additional information about the correlation structures between different models. So during COVID, we had like this multi-model ensemble with each of the different universities' models of the way the pandemic propagates. And the state of the art was just assume they're all independent, right? And do your uncertainty quantification as if each of them is producing its own results, and then we just do an ensemble average across that. There is really interesting and deep correlation structure between different computational models of the same phenomena, right? Because if you were a postdoc in my lab, your ideas are more closely related, right, to my models, right? Models borrow from one another, like genetic borrowing. They descend from one another. It's a bit like the phylogenetics of computational models, right? And we can infer some things about that from things like GitHub metadata, right? That's quite interesting. A lot of what we do when we're building platforms for computational science spaces is make tools which it's easy for people to express the problems of their scientific domain in, right? So here's a particular domain. I want to be able to make it quicker to set up a model in a particular field. So we make some tool, we make some platform, we make some middleware. These are domain-specific languages. A lot of what we do in computational science is effectively language design, right? And I have no idea yet, this is an area I'm interested in, this is sort of advertising for research questions I'm interested in, just getting started on. What is GPT-assisted, etc., programming going to look like for computational science? Because most of what we've looked at so far is, hey GPT, generate me some code for selling widgets on a website. I reckon it's pretty solid at that now, right? Hey GPT, do me Julia code for a 2D wave equation on an adaptive mesh, right? Perhaps less so, okay? So that's going to be really interesting. And then the other area I'm really interested in is bringing digital research methods into new disciplines and what comes from those interdisciplinary encounters, right? All the interesting problems in computer science are socio-technical, right? They involve thinking about maths, computers, and data, and they involve thinking about people, right? And when you're a ex-physicist, spent some time in biology, spent some time in climate science, spent some time in public health, right? Living with machines is a really interesting project I was on in the Turing, which is using natural language processing to look at all of the history of the 19th century. So we had all of the books, newspapers, computers, trade directories, ordnance survey maps from Victorian England, all of them. Nice data set from the British Library. It's fun to play with. And then looking at the history of industrial accidents and the history of the Industrial Revolution and what train lines do to cities and so on through those distant reading methods. Doing that in a way that is sensitive to the dialogue between computery people and historians, right? And is not just, hey, I'm from California and I know how to do your discipline better than 200 years of your field, right? Which is what a lot of people in our space sometimes seem to do, is really, really interesting. And so wandering into other people's disciplines and then having a respectful dialogue about what we can bring as data and computer and mathy people is an area that's fascinating to me. All right, so one other thing on that sort of social point, right? People have come across this recent comedy bug. If you get this stuff wrong, right, it can be very, very problematic from a inclusivity and a political approach, right? And one of the things that's really challenging for us is, as we build systems, we automatically encode our biases. We're not aware that we're doing it, right? We're understanding about how we encode biases in data sets, programmers' biases. The classic example that we teach is get Western Europeans to build a database that models people's names.
Sorry about that. How do I turn? Yeah. I think we need to turn the speakers off on the other side.
Yeah. On the other side.
Yeah.
Like if you stand this way a bit. I think it's something to do with this.
Okay, I'll stand over here. Not allowed to go over there, or I make us all.
Sorry about that.
All right. Anyway, so that's the problem. Okay. So one other example. So this is back to this theme, right, of the danger we can cause as engineers in this space, doing this kind of embarrassing thing, right? As the people who build these systems, we have a unique power to make sure that these kind of sensitive questions of how we use that, how we stop ourselves being creating a new post office scandal with these things. The people who build them are the last line of defense. So I always like to use this example. It's a scary one. This is the Enola Gay. It took off and dropped a bomb on Nagasaki and Hiroshima. And Rudolf Piles, extremely clever theoretical physicist, worked on the Manhattan Project, was also quite a good electrician. And he was there, and they noticed that the trigger mechanism, nothing to do with the nuke, the trigger mechanism had some sticky connections. And he just used his skills as a electrician to fix it. And therefore, that was an afterwards, that really disturbed him. How visceral a connection you have between being the person who actually fixes the sticky connection on the wire, right? And what happens doing it. So as somebody who builds stuff and makes stuff, you are the person who is most closely connected to the good or ill of the systems that you create, right? So back to this question, of how do we evolve towards a space where those of us who are incredibly powerful in building the networks, building the code, doing the data management for these systems, how do we create a space where the systems that come out of research are curated and are carefully thought about with that kind of engineering professionalism that you have when you're an engineer of physiology? We have a word for engineers of physiology. We call them doctors, right? And you can get struck off for doing that badly. There's nothing of that kind in our space yet. So in UCL, I've been trying to create a space in the university where those of us who are working on the nitty-gritty of the engineering inside I think there's a phasing issue. I think if I stand in the anti-node, right, then it's noisy, and if I stand in the node, then anyway, so we can do some physics experiments with them. So in the UCL Centre for Advanced Research Computing, in the same place as the AI Centre and the Medical Image Computing Centre, we're interested in this nitty-gritty, right? The engineering questions of building systems that do these things. Here's how I tell this story. So this set of slides, right? The red boxes are somebody who is a academic in a field of your choice. Let's say somewhere in social sciences or whatever, right? And they come along to the computer science department and they say, "Hey, you're a computer scientist. Can you collaborate with me so I can do machine learning on my data, please?" And the computer scientist says, "Is there anything novel in the methodology? I've got to get some computer science publications out of this." "No, I'm just trying to use the tool to make progress in my social sciences question." Computer scientist isn't interested. Okay, next challenge. I'll hire a 2-year postdoc to do lots of you in this room, everyone, to go and do that part. It's quite hard to. Many of you are not going to remain within the university for very long, and it's quite hard for universities to access and retain the good skills we need to do the engineering, right? Whether it's the coding or the model building or the training or the validation, etc. Okay, says the academic, I know what I'll do to fix this problem. I'll talk to our university IT department. Does anyone know what ITIL is? If you don't, I'm really pleased for you, okay? If you've been part of any IT communities, you might. Right? So that doesn't tend to work in these spaces either. Fine, says the academic. I'll wrangle the data myself. Ref is not kind in those circumstances. So those two problems come together, right? That challenge that I've just described with those pictures from the point of view of the academic, right? And my concern that we're not being professional enough with the building of the engineering core of the things that we're making for the level of power and importance they're going to have in the effectiveness of science and scholarship during the 21st century. So in UCL, I lead this Advanced Research Computing Center. And we are deliberately, and this is the bit that I think is essential to make this work, both academic and professional, right? We are research engineers. We build the platforms that enable computational science and scholarship in the university. Run the HPC systems, the big GPU networks, those kind of things. We do our own research in the tools, practices, and systems of computational science and digital scholarship. You saw a few of those when I was talking about my own research interests earlier. And we have a large pool of staff scientists on permanent contracts working with academics around the university on the engineering challenges of their research, right? Instead of the traditional sort of postdoc approach. And they collaborate with researchers around the university. And we are evaluated on utility and curiosity and community, right? The interdisciplinarity of community, doing things that are scientifically interesting, right? We will never get talent if we're just an IT function, right? None of you, right, with all of your wonderful skills, want to come and work in something that is not part of the scientific community, right? So we're doing things that are based on our curiosity, but we are passionately committed to doing it in a professional way, right? Where in our mind, we deserve to be struck off if we're publishing false results because there's a bug in the code, right? Now, there's no such thing as that, obviously, right? But that kind of professionalism is part of what makes this hybrid work. That's just another slide that says the same thing. I'm going to move on for pace. I'm going to do, hopefully this will work. I'm just going to hear some stories of some of the projects that our community of researchers work on. It'll give me a chance.
We formed long-standing relationships with many of our collaborators, successively winning grants from different sources, continue research, or take it in new directions. Our first example is the case in point. I'll hand over to Steve to tell us more about it.
Thanks, Jonathan. My name is Steve Harris. I'm an NHS consultant at UCLH and the Chief Research Information Officer for the Trust. We've been working with ARC with real impact over the last decade, initially starting out with the NIHI Health Informatics Collaborative, which is around making NHS routine data available to researchers, what I sort of typically call the left to right pathway. But much more excitingly and importantly, working over the last few years on the right to that pathway, that is getting insights, innovations from academic world back into the hospital to actually improve and change care. We've done that by collaborating, designing, co-developing something called the Experimental Medicine Application Platform, which was funded by UCLH charity, and we have built on top of that a series of actual tools which are currently used inside the hospital. During the pandemic, we built a live separate tool to allow us to stratify and prioritise which patients need for critical care needs. We have subsequently gone on to see a publication in Nature Digital Medicine around identifying the demands of the pressure on hospital from the A&E department in real time, and a series of other important projects are coming online either now or in the near future, looking at antimicrobial resistance and real-time quality improvement.
Having a real impact on clinical practice.
Yeah, well, we really enjoy the collaboration, and I think the key to these things is not just technology problems, relationships, and we have a great opportunity to help an industrial crisis really from the hospital. We can continue this way of working.
Often, users of our compute and data services become direct collaborators as their needs grow more complex, while they discover through our free advice sessions that our staff can engage with their research in more depth. Andrew Phillips had this experience.
Yeah, so we've been working on a model called the HIV synthesis model, which is an existing individual-based model coded in SAS. And it's been used extensively to inform HIV programs in parts of Africa. When we started the collaboration with colleagues from ARC, they were able to help us a lot with, for example, use of Git, GitHub, advice on coding approaches, enhancement of our approach to running our code on Myriad, and also now to actually update the code using Python. We also worked right from the start on another model with colleagues from ARC called the Tanzala Onza model, Health of All, in Malawi. And this is a comprehensive individual-based model of health and the influence of the health system in the context of Malawi. It's been used to inform policy in Malawi and will be used in other countries in the region. The colleagues from ARC led on this right from the start on the design of the entire framework. And again, we've been learning from that process about code structure, about conventions, ways of having documentation, and that also helped teaching us Python so that we can use the code ourselves.
Andrew, it's great to hear that ARC's teaching activities combined with research to make a big impact on your work. Our team has collaborated with every UCL faculty over the years, as all fields of research become increasingly computational. As one example, ARC's data scientists are working with researchers in social sciences to investigate the potential of large language models. I'll hand over to James to tell us more.
Thank you. I'm based at the Epicenter, which is part of the Social Science Research Unit at the Social Research Institute at the Institute of Education. And we've been working here for a number of years now, where we have a long-standing program of work conducting systematic reviews to inform policy, mostly at the Department of Health and Social Care, but other government departments as well. We've got an international reputation as a centre of excellence in this area for our methodological innovation and for our information technologies for evidence synthesis. We publish a platform for systematic reviews called EpiReviewer, which has been used by tens of thousands of people as a software as a service that we publish online. And machine learning is a key part of workload optimization within that platform. We work with some major organizations, Cochrane, the largest systematic review body in the world, NICE, the Education Endowment Foundation, and other software platforms. And they all use our machine learning offerings. They're increasingly important. So that means that our work with ARC is that's where we're doing R&D. So during the pandemic, we maintained a map of research for the department. Now over 200,000 research studies in there, very, very expensive to maintain. But in collaboration with the ARC, we built this machine learning model, which essentially has saved more than £100,000 of our staff time. And that's meant that we've been able to continue to maintain the map, whereas others offerings have had to sort of fall by the wayside because it's so expensive to maintain these things. We've also worked with ARC on developing a clinical trial report reader, very important to get accurate and well-structured data on clinical trials for systematic reviews. And we're now currently working on using large language models to index research at scale. So, potentially all of research in the whole of science is what we're interested in here, and also extracting data, fine-grained data, structured data out of papers to make our review processes much more efficient. So we really benefit from our collaboration with ARC, because within a social science institution or a social science department, it's difficult to attract computer scientists and data scientists one at a time to research projects. But being able to collaborate with ARC has meant that we've had that expertise embedded within the projects, and also obviously the ARC team has its own support structures and career progression.
Okay, back to me. And just want to, this is scaling pretty fast, right? So that's the number of people over time. And for those of you who are university leaders, the interesting thing to note is that the bit that's paid for from central university funding is pretty flat. this is all research income, right? This is PIs choosing to work with the ARC model over the traditional sort of, postdocs in their own lab model. We started in this, right, with the RSEs, with research software engineering. I've talked a lot about the implications of the software that we use. In UCL, led that. There are now research software groups on that model that we started in UCL in many universities around the UK and around the world, making, I think, quite a significant difference. But when we moved on from the research software group to the bigger centre in UCL ARC, we're doing this now across 5 professions. And here in the machine learning for science piece, I think that the data science story, we talked about some of the work. There's a lot of people in university, postdoc background people, who end up being the organisers, the project managers for large-scale research projects and research centres, right? And this is a typical way to, be on your 9th postdoc doing that. We're trying to create a stable home for that. This is this PRISM movement. Actually started in Exeter, but we've lent heavily into that within UCL ARC. Our research infrastructure developers, so many of these projects, as well as research software engineering, need lots of work to scale and deploy these things in repeatable fashion, right? The processes by which now you go about, managing pools of containers, all the Kubernetes stuff and those kind of things, it's a huge area for us. And then the area that I'm personally most excited about is professionalizing data stewardship within universities. So creating a stable place within the academy where the people who manage the ontologies, manage the data models, look after the data, make sure all the metadata is properly curated, right? Where again, that's been an area where we know there are lots of people around the university who want to try to do this stuff in that stable engineering professionalism way that I was talking about at the beginning, which is so critical to the trustworthiness and reliability and safety of the results. And yet creating a space within the university where that can be done with a proper career that has this hybrid being part of the scientific and scholarly community and being a professional at the same time that I've kept emphasizing is important. We work with all the faculties. As I mentioned earlier, in the joke slides about the dialogue with academics, the IT space is a really challenging one in a lot of universities, right? And it's been really important in establishing ARC that we're friends with, but independent from university IT, right? And having a group of people who are from that, academic background who've decided that we're really interested in the technology questions of science and scholarship, being in that space with the university IT is really helpful in lots of subtle ways. I mean, making sure that the university IT systems work from Linux, right? Helps if you've got some people in the, that's a silly example, right? So that's what I mean by we can be each other's superpowers, but that's been difficult work, right, to establish that, and it's essential for our ability to create this home for PhD and postdoc talent working as research engineers. We do a lot of teaching. Some of that came up in the video that I showed. I'm particularly pleased with the new course that we've just created, Engineering for Data Analysis. Lots of industry folk rang our head of computer science and said, hey, you keep churning out people who understand the maths of machine learning really well, but they can't deploy a pipeline in the cloud. Would you mind awfully teaching them how to actually build things? So me and some colleagues now teach that. It's a new MSc starting, an Engineering for Data Analysis, and a course in each of the terms. And by the end of it, fully infrastructure as code, complete machine learning pipeline deployed from Terraform and Ansible onto AWS. That sounds like something you'd know how to do. Good. And we have a new doctoral training centre starting not October now, October the year after, in computational modelling at the interface, basically AI. And when I talked at the beginning about the third and fourth paradigms of science, how can those work together? So that's going to be fun. We have a nice show. If anybody's coming out to supercomputing in Atlanta in October, we usually have a nice show there about the things that we're doing. So I'm coming back again to, I'm going to conclude and move on to questions. What we've been trying to do all along, I'm just leave this as nearly the last slide, being both the craftsperson and the scholar at the same time. Remind you, Universal Turing Machine, this is the Bombi, this is the machine that won the Second World War, that's bad history, lots of things, many contributing factors, I don't really mean it, historians, but one person, right? And that's who we want to be as research engineers. I will play a silly song to indicate what not to be.
Code monkey, get up, get coffee. Code monkey, go to job. Code monkey, have boring meeting. Boring manager, Rob. Rob say code monkey, very diligent, but his output stink. His code not functional or elegant. What do code monkey think? Code monkey think maybe manager wanna write goddamn login page. Tell code monkey not dated. Out loud, code monkey not crazy. Just proud.
Right, I'm not going to play the whole song. But what I've been trying to inspire people with is the power we have as the people who actually make these things, which are going to transform all of science and scholarship and society. The responsibility that gives us, right? Don't be the person who creates the next post office scandal made of AI, right? Be an engineer.
Well, well, thank you for your talk. There was a lot to unwrap there, and also apologies for the feedback to you and the crowd. Yeah, I would like to start off with a question, and then we can ask the crowd as well. If you aren't in an environment where you have this sort of established infrastructure you're describing, there are different divisions, and this proper engineering environment, but you're, let's say, your own researcher, PhD student, postdoc in a group, how would you go about engineerizing?
Good. Yeah, that's a really important question. And obviously, the first thing I would say is many of the universities are on the pathway towards creating this, and sometimes it's right. I'm actually slightly uncomfortable that the UCL, we've done it as one big central institute. I kind of, when we started, thought it was going to be a couple of RSEs and data scientists as professionals in each department and faculty as a better way of doing it. But that's not been possible because of basically the way funding works and the way careers work. That's why we've ended up doing it in a central centre, right? So the fact that in UCL we've got this big centre doesn't mean that that's necessarily the right structural model for all institutions. I have found, and this is probably bad advice, that just the point about being in an academic setting is just is the space to just do the things you think are bloody important, pardon my French, right? Now, for me, that meant, as I said at the beginning of the talk, right, writing too much code and not enough papers may not be the way to win at the academic career game, right? But it's the way that we're going to win in the digital transformation of science and scholarship. So stick your neck out a bit, right? If you say, I'm going to take the time to not just write 90,000 lines of Fortran with no subroutines, I'm going to actually, get this stuff working so that it runs with all the unit testing and all the automated deployment and all those good pieces, right? In the end, it will have a productivity feedback, right? Try and use some of the arguments that I've been pushing. with your supervisor. Hopefully your supervisor's in the room and he's now totally persuaded and he's got to run away and go, we need to immediately adopt this. But if they're not like that, right, and it's all about, 5 papers at NeurIPS every year and that's what matters, right? Then I still think your productivity will improve by doing these things in this way, right? Don't reinvent the wheel. Look to see what, worst thing we do in computational science is everybody writes their own code and nobody uses anybody else's code. Get together with some other people in the university who are interested in this stuff and build everybody during their PhD and postdoc build some kind of computational experiment management tool. We all do it, right? I'm not aware of anyone who didn't build some kind of automated tool that says, oh, every time I run a computational experiment, it gets the results nightly back from the computer and organizes them. There are people that maintain those as tools, right? But we all make our own one during our PhDs, right? Because writing code is more fun than learning other people's code. I know it is, but we'll make more of a difference if we do it together. So that's part of it. Take the opportunity to find it, to learn, right? I was a terrible programmer all throughout my first round of postdocing until I went to the MathWorks, right? That was where I learned to do this stuff properly, right? So the other thing is we do need to be better at moving back and forth between industry and academia. It's a pain in the neck that you have those publication gaps when you're often doing something professionally, but it's so important, right? Computer science is a bit better than other disciplines for it, but it still sucks.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Okay.
I'm intrigued as to how you got UCL to move away from saying, oh, you still need 4 papers for your next promotion. Because as an RSE, that is my target. I need 4 reputable papers. I've got to be teaching international students, and I've got to be bringing the 71 Ks worth of research, and I've got to be internationally recognized by the field. But there's no mention of how much code I wrote.
Yeah, so that's been one of the bits of university politics that I've been most proud of, right, is creating a promotions pathway for RSEs, data scientists, data stewards, research infrastructure developers, and research managers, which is a balanced hybrid of engineering work, research work, teaching work, professional work, right? And it seems to be working. We were able to move some people who they were line managers in the old structures, and particularly in the research infrastructure developers community, who moved out from IT into ARC when we created it. They were line managers, and they didn't want to be line managers. They hated line managering, right? They did it because it was the only way to move up through the university grades, right? And there's a few people who've been able to take that off of and give them an opportunity to flourish as research engineers doing and then that's better for everybody, because then the line manager is people who like line managering, right, and care about it and are interested in the practice and art of that. But I won't deny that it was difficult, right? And I think, leaning into things like the resume for research innovation, the narrative CV that UKRI have recently been the R4RI thing, which gives an opportunity to have that balance piece. Things like the Concordat on, what's it called? The thing which says we're not going to judge research by what journal it's in, but by the quality of the research. I can't remember what it's called. There's a Declaration on Research Assessment, DORA, that's right. Which is important for us because the places where we do publish, right? We publish experience stories, we publish engineering stories, we publish about, in Birds of a Feather meetings at supercomputing and those kind of things on, what we learn from building these systems, right? But the impact factors on those things are terrible within the context of the typical thing. But, the Declaration on Research Assessment matters for that, right? This is what I mean when I talk about the hybrid identity of being both part of the scholarly community and the professional community at the same time.
Are those available that we can use to pass to our management?
Yes, everything is open source. The job description frameworks from apprentice to professorial, so professorial research software engineer, professorial data scientist, etc. It's all open source.
That reminded me of something I wanted to ask earlier. You mentioned very many things in this talk. And one of the things was you guys are working on tools, for example, for automating reviewing. Is that also, if I understood correctly, I think it was called EPO or EPO. Is that also open source? And how does this work compared to a literature review?
Yeah, so that was the example from one of the labs that we collaborate with, right? So again, this is one where my data scientist team are doing the the NLP consulting, right, into James Thomas's lab, where they're looking at the implications of that kind of automated peer review. So I won't comment now on James's end of that work, if you see what I mean, right? Our role within that is the internal data science and AI consultancy within the university, right? And it is interesting that it's been, the RSE story, let's have a pool of people who are, postdoc background people who are interested in programming, working with academics around the university to make that side of things more reliable and safer. That's 10 years old now, right? And doesn't raise as many eyebrows because it's used to. Doing the same thing with computational statistics, doing the same thing with the design of machine learning systems, our data science consulting, right, is younger, right? So just to give you some idea of the scale, I think we've got 40 RSEs and 12 data scientists, about 20 research infrastructure developers, and about 10 data stewards, right? So the RSEs is the biggest piece by a long way, if you see what I mean. But the fundamental reason why I see this as a safety, reliability, trustworthy, not that I'm in any way saying that the particular lab we're working with there weren't doing it, right? But creating a space for that kind of data science professionalism, it's not just for efficiency, it's for the kind of safety and reliability issues that I said at the top.
Thank you. We have questions. We have time for maybe one or two more questions.
I'll run the microphone over.
Maybe Anna is a bit closer, and then we'll do.
Thank you. So I have a question about that centrally managed but locally delivered model versus what the ARC is. If you could compare for me, what would be the benefit of the ARC against that one? Because there are good arguments for that one too.
So in practice, it's money. So departments and faculties haven't been able to, as within our context, find the risk appetite to create permanent roles within departments and faculties for data scientists or RSEs. And this is just the UCL context. It may well be different in other institutions. Because once we won the argument centrally to do that, it's easier then, I can create posts. Right? We have a deal over if we successfully cost recover in year end, we're allowed so many more posts in year end plus one. Right? And that means we're not then, the head of department or the dean of the faculty isn't then having to make those separate financial arguments every time we want to expand those roles within the faculty. I actually think scientifically, right, it'd be better to go the other way. What we're now doing is strongly emphasizing that the ARC folk have a virtual association with the departments that they're working with, right? So, and then we get into space fights, because what I say is I want everybody who's working on a project in chemistry to have a desk in chemistry as well as a desk in our building in the AI center, right? That's sometimes a little bit challenging from a university space point of view. Of course, everybody knows that all the labs are empty post-COVID because everyone's working from home, but people still won't give us desks. But that matters from a community point of view, right? This is what, when I talk about the the interesting issues around disciplinary boundary crossing and what it means to be a computery person who goes and authoritatively in your own area, but humbly in terms of understanding of somebody else's research context, go and have a conversation with a historian about using NLP in their area, for example, right? Those are areas where the human relationship story, the socio-technical issues really matter, and therefore spending time together as we're not, we're highly evolved primates, right? And therefore all of the social issues really matter when it comes to doing those kind of interdisciplinary encounters safely.
I think we have a second.
Oh, great. Thanks very much for the talk. I wanted to ask you a question about I think most people here, when they think of coding, they're thinking of like building an artifact that's going to be with the paper that gets released on GitHub. Some journals are getting a bit more strict about at least code availability or checks on that. Do you think there should be kind of more rigorous code review with these things, or is that going to be too onerous?
So the nature of verifying reproducibility, verifying research safety in the context of highly computational code, right, is really hard, right? What we ought to do, right, as reviewers, is run rerun the analysis. Well, are journals going to give us access time to major GPU clusters in order to verify the research? That's not happening, right? I kind of think that reviewers ought to verify the engineering practices, so verify the presence of a good testing regime, right? And if there's not something, it should be in the paper, right? The paper should say, here are the engineering practices we used in developing the code. We did this unit testing approach. There's this many tests in the suite, yada, yada, yada. If you don't see that, I would recommend people to send back and ask for that to be added to a paper, right? I was the token, we need to be careful not to breach confidences. I was the token computery person on a major charity funders panels for a while in epidemiology, and being able to get to not funding something because there was no evidence that the computational and data science and computational statistics requirements were taken seriously was really hard, right? Because those are not things that traditionally are significant criteria in these things. We are working quite hard to try to get as many as possible of our research professionals within peer review colleges of panels. There are now plenty of RSEs. The RSE movement's targeted this, but for data scientists and data stewards, I think it's important as well. And that's probably the best check and balance we've got. I mean, it's not great, right? But I think it's the best check and balance we've got because we are not resourced to do genuine reproducibility. We used to have a retraction club back when I was a postdoc, which was fun in that space, which is only a group of people who went and just read papers that had been retracted to try and, so, these things are interesting.
Thank you very much. In the interest of time, if you have any more questions, then please find Professor Hetherington at the breaks. And please, let's give him one more round of applause for his talk.